3.5 days, I was on life support. When I was placed on life support, my chances of survival were 30%. By the time we got to 3.5 days later, my chances of survival were less than 1%. So my name's Alex Lewis. I had a partner, Lucy. I had a young son called Sam, who in 2013 was about 2.5, I think. So life was pretty good, a normal family unit. But in hindsight, I was a struggling alcoholic at that point in my life. I was to excess every day, every night. I was a stay-at-home father to my young son, so I wasn't very aware, or probably as aware as I should have been. And then in November 2013, I caught just a common cold. No more than that. Well, that's what we thought at the time. It got to sort of flu-like symptoms, and I'd never had flu at that point. You know, lack of sleep, hot and cold sweats. So I knew then something was quite seriously wrong with me. I remember going back to bed, told Lucy what I'd just seen, and she said, look, go back to sleep in the morning. We'll call the doctors straight away. And then when I woke the following morning, Lucy had gone to open our other restaurant, which was about 20 minutes away. And I couldn't push myself out of bed, couldn't operate my arms, my legs, my hands weren't working, didn't really understand what was going on. And then I noticed that my skin was starting to turn purple. I remember a knock on the door downstairs. I remember sliding down the stairs so I couldn't walk properly. I tried to open the back door but couldn't do it. And then the next thing I remember is Lucy coming through the back door, pushing me out the way. I was slumped to the floor, and then her and my stepfather coming in to the pot wash area and then immediately calling 999. They said to Lucy, look, your husband's probably got 20 minutes before he passes away. We need to get him into the back of the ambulance. We need to get him to ICU immediately. One doctor asked a question about watercourses, and he said to Lucy, has Alex been near any watercourses recently? And she goes, what do you mean? And he said, well, like a river or a storm drain or drain. Lucy relayed the information, and then the doctor felt that I was probably suffering with Vail's disease, which is rat's urine in watercourses. So he called in Lucy and my mother. Alex probably isn't going to make it through the 4th night, but we can keep him alive mechanically, and in the morning we can wake him. He won't be able to hear you, but you can say your final goodbyes. So they went away that night thinking that I was going to pass away, and then through the course of the evening, Jeff tried a treatment that was frowned upon in the UK at that point. It was a recognised method of treatment in the US, but it hadn't come to England yet. But he felt that I was going to die, so we might as well try something. And he basically gave me just a huge amount of enormous, enough to sort of a donkey kind of thing. Kept the strep at bay, and it kept me alive. So the following morning when Lucy and my mum came in, I was awake. I can't remember them coming in, but after that there was a steady stream of people coming to see me, friends, family. My best friend had flown in from France at that point, so he was there. And I think we kind of felt that I'd survived something pretty weird. We'd never heard of strep A at that point. And I think in my mind, because I woke up and I was in hospital, I felt that I got through the worst of it, that I was going to just get back to normal and go home, carry on. And then after about a week of being in Winchester, they said to me that they can't continue my care, and they wouldn't say why. And so they moved me from Winchester to Salisbury. When I arrived in Salisbury, my legs were black at that point. My arms were black, my nose was black, my mouth was black, ears were black. Everything was dying, because the strep was trying to get to my heart to kill me. So the course of action was just to amputate left arm, amputate both legs, and try and save the right arm. Yeah, all this was going on in the space of 8 days from falling ill. So it was pretty wild. You know, I was still desperately ill. I was still dying, and I was still being treated for strep. In hindsight, I was probably 3/4 out of it. I remember lying in Salisbury, having just had my left arm amputated, and thinking to myself, you know, what on earth is Lucy thinking about this? What on earth does Sam know about this? What must my parents be feeling? You were more concerned for others, I think, at that point, because it was obvious that I was being looked after and being given the best treatment available to me at that point. But my family were just watching me. Well, they were literally watching bits being amputated, cut off. I mean, it was just an awful time. You know, there were nights when you're lying awake in pain, you know, and you're looking at the ceiling in the hospital room thinking, what on earth is happening here? How did I get to this point? I don't want to be a burden to my family. That's the last thing I want. I put them through so much over the last 8 months, and I'm going to keep putting them through this stuff. I remember my best friend flying in from France, come and see me that last weekend, and he said, no, you don't understand. I've given up my job in France, and I'm going to move in with you, Lucy and Sam, and we're going to figure this out. And the following day, he packed up my bag and he took me home, and he moved in with us, and he was able to become a godfather to my son, a fantastic best friend to me, fantastic friend to Lucy. In all honesty, if he hadn't have done that for me and my family, I probably wouldn't be here now talking to you. I certainly wouldn't have achieved or done 99% of the stuff that I've done if he hadn't have given up his time for me and my family. So I'm forever in his debt, really, for what he gave up for us. I lost my right arm, sadly. I broke that 6 months after surgery, and they had to amputate my right arm. So I was a quadruple amputee and a severe quad. I wasn't missing ankles and feet and hands. I was missing above elbow, below elbow, above knee, double above knee. So I was very expensive, basically. So once I'd had all the surgeries and I was going through rehab in London, when I realised that they couldn't give me the kit, I left rehab because the National Health Service were going to give me equipment I wasn't going to use. And I thought that was ridiculous because there could be somebody behind me that could use the equipment. So I wasn't going to take something that I wasn't going to utilise. So when I came out of rehab in London, we had nothing. We had no legs. I had a couple of prosthetic arms, which weren't very good. And at that point, I was picked up by a military charity on the south coast of England. Now, I'm not ex-military, but they felt that the mindset that I had continued with, it kind of, people started to hear about what was going on and how I was coping with it. And they felt that my mindset would work really well within the military community. So these guys kind of took me under their wing and said, we do some adventure stuff like kayaking and skydiving and all that sort of thing. And that's never my thing. Before I fell ill, I was a golfer. That was it, but never down that kind of adventure route. And then they invited me skydiving. And I think if I'd had legs and arms and somebody invited me skydiving, I'd say no, I wouldn't do it. But at that point in my life, I just reached rock bottom. There was nothing, there was only one way, and it was up. So any opportunity that was going to come my way, I was going to grab it. And they invited me skydiving. I did it. I loved it. I loved every second of it. And it made me realise that for years I'd been living this kind of almost closeted life in a way, sheltered world, not willing to take opportunities or chances when I should have done. So from 45 to get me to 70, I'd be looking at about £5 million worth of equipment through wheelchairs and legs and arms. And then in 2017, we founded a project called the Wild Wheelchairs Project. And the idea of that was we would develop these wild wheelchairs that could enable people like me to scale a mountain, cross a desert, cross an ocean, and do something in flight in the air. And the idea was that we would develop that wheelchair and leave it in northern Ethiopia. We had this grand scheme that we would be able to leave it there and then just chart if people are using it. So could an amputee use it to cycle to a doctor's appointment? Could they take one of their friends to the doctors in those northern territories? But unfortunately, we couldn't leave the hand cycle out there because of insurances and ethics from the university. But then we started to use our adventure as a source of, not inspiration, but to get the students even more engaged in what we're doing. So it wasn't a case of, design a prosthetic because there's not one on the market. We looked at it from an activity type. So how do I, as a guy with no arms and legs, how do I attach to an oar? How do I safely detach from the oar? What happens if I fall in the water? Can I release from the oar independently? Historically know there is no prosthetics out there that do anything like that. So we started to develop equipment that was with a sort of health and safety focus as well. From what we started out as just a few ideas as built into this enormous task, I guess. I think my perspective on life prior to falling ill was awful. I was just stuck in a rut of doing the same thing every day. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I didn't know what I wanted to be. And I let so many years just pass me by, just doing nothing. At that point, I thought life was good, but that was life at its worst, not at its best. But falling ill made me realise that I had wasted those years, and that for what happened to me, it was by pure chance that the consultant looking after me wanted to take a risk to try and keep me alive. 99% of the other consultants would probably left me to die, on the premise that there was no life post-injury. In their heads, it was, well, he's probably going to end up as a quadruple amputee, so does he want to live like that? And I think if you ask most people would say, no, I don't want to be like that. But for me, that's made me work even harder to prove that there is a life after injury, and to prove to the NHS, to my plastic surgeon, to the consultant that saved my life, to the consultant that diagnosed the strap, that I was worth saving. And what I've gone on to do proves that there is life after injury.